Good morning, everyone. So we're going to get started here in just a second. So Trina, if you can come up here, since you'll be our first speaker. Deb and Lisa, thank you both so much for helping to wrangle all of the equipment for us this morning. Huge thanks to you all for that. So we also have some members of the audience who are going to be joining us virtually. And so I think we'll be able to, excuse me, interact with them through any questions that they have online throughout the session, both this morning that goes till 10:30. And then following the break, we'll continue on the same topic for our last four presenters. So are we good to go?
Yeah, I was checking the audio, so you should be good.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're really excited to be here with you all as part of this conference proceedings. And we've got a lot of really great speakers today who are here to share the amazing collaborative efforts that are taking place across the United States. So I know that we also have some international members of the conference here today. So we welcome you all too. But we just wanted to share some examples of some successful collaborative efforts that are taking place here in the US related to B.A.T.S and transportation structures. And so I know it's been touched on previously in other presentations throughout this conference that transportation structures can serve as really critical habitat for different bats at different times of their lives. And so we'll be hearing today from a variety of speakers from different agencies and organizations who have been engaged in trying to help us to understand what bats are tied to these structures, at what times of their lives, and where they live, so that we can get a better sense of how to accommodate and protect these bats while also allowing for really critical transportation improvement projects to move forward. So our first speaker today is Trina Morris. And so Trina is the Wildlife Conservation Program Manager for the Wildlife Resources Division of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. I know we have a lot of folks across Georgia with us this morning, so thanks for representing. Trina is also the BAT Working Group Chair for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. She'll be kicking us off with her presentation, an Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies resolution for bats, promoting cooperation with state transportation agencies. So Trina will have about 5 minutes after each presentation for questions. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate the introduction. As she said, I'm with Georgia DNR, but I'm also here as a representative of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies BAT Working Group. And I want to give you some information about how maybe you can use some of the things that have already been done to help get more BAT work done with transportation projects in your state. So first, I have to acknowledge that the reason we're here is that bats aren't doing great. So for the first time in 2023, we had a State of the Bats report published. There was an associated publication completed last year. And the State of the Bats report is really important. We haven't had one before. And that's kind of ridiculous because we've had a State of the Birds report since the 90s. So we really haven't been paying as much attention to bats as maybe we should have. But if you look at that report, and there's a QR code here to take you to it if you haven't seen it, it's over half of our species in North America are in need of some kind of conservation action. That's pretty dire. And when you look at the United States, Mexico has a lot more species than we do. The United States has a significant number of species that really need conservation help. And so we really have a reason behind what we're trying to do with bats and transportation structures, because we really have an obligation to these species to help them out. So why am I here talking to you about this today? Well, Lacey Padavina with the spotlight, and Emily Farrell in the middle, and I were working at Georgia DNR, and we worked on all kinds of transportation projects with all different species, but we were trying to figure out, like, once we started to find some bats, how many bats do we actually have? And the more we looked, we realized, like, whoa, we actually have a lot of bats in transportation structures. And, we didn't really know what to expect when we started looking. We didn't know how to look. We really just had no idea what we were doing. So we were faking it. And we decided that once we determined that this was an issue, we had to make sure we got support from DOT for this work. Like, we needed to bring DOT on board and have them understand that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And we're very lucky in Georgia that we have a great working relationship with our Department of Transportation. And we were able to, we were able to convince them that it's important, not just for birds because of the Migratory Bird Act, but bats are just as important, and we need to survey for them. We're out there already completing these pre-construction surveys. Why not throw in bats? And they agreed. So now it's required statewide that all of our projects be surveyed for bats as well as birds. That's been a huge deal for us and really helpful, and helped us better understand exactly what was going on our structures and find bats early in the process, so we didn't run into issues at the end of construction planning when things got really complicated. So we also realized as we were doing this that a lot of states had the same questions, and the more other states looked, the more questions they had. So we happened to be hosting a Southeastern Bat Diversity Network meeting in Athens in 2020, like a week before the world shut down. And we decided we would start a working group. We called it B.A.T.S. Isn't that unique? Bats and Transportation Structures. And we organized it and had just a table full of people show up at a lunch, and we kind of talked about what was going on, and we started to realize that we didn't need to duplicate all these efforts that were happening in every individual state. So we wanted to talk more about it. So we started this group as a formal working group as part of the Southeastern Bat Diversity Network, but we invited anyone to join. So now we have members from all over North America. And if you are interested in participating in this group, it's not a big obligation. You can go to that QR code. There's an Excel sheet where you can put your email address in, and I'll add you to our Google Groups list. And then we meet really when we need to now. We don't have a regularly set meeting, except for generally at the Southeastern Bat Diversity Network meeting in the spring. And we try to do that virtually when it's possible so other people can join. But we do have a lot of materials available on that Google Drive from other states that you can access. Lots of training materials and information that's helpful for bats and transportation structures. And then as part of AFWA, we realized that this was an issue that was becoming more of a thing across the US and Canada. So this group really is a group that's trying to help out state resource agencies with issues that come up to the top of their priority list in multiple regions. So what we do as a working group is we talk to all of our bat representatives in all of our states and ask them, like, what are the things that you're having trouble with? What do we need to elevate to a director level at your state resource agency? And so this kept coming up again and again. So we decided that it was something we wanted to address. And we started to do that with a webinar that we hosted, and it's recorded, so you can watch it at that link. We had examples basically of states that already had good working relationships between their DOT and their state resource agency, how they worked that out with funding, and just some examples of the really good projects they were able to do collaboratively between those agencies. And so that was really helpful to kind of get the conversation going. And it was a good conversation, but we realized that it wasn't enough for some states. In some states, they were just getting too much pushback that you don't need to pay attention to bats. They aren't federally protected. There's no real state law for this. In a lot of states, bats aren't protected at all by state law, so it's really problematic. So the next step was that we decided we needed to do a resolution through AFWA. And if you haven't seen these before, they are not exciting. There's a lot of legal jargon and whereas statements. I had no idea how to do any of this before I started on this group. But it's basically something that goes to the directors for vote, and they decide if it's something that is, a thing that the association should support. Basically trying to tell all the states that this is a national thing that they should pay attention to. And it's something that is supported by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So that passed, and it passed unanimously, so that was good. So now we have a final resolution, and we're working on implementing the things that are in that. And basically what that resolution says that was passed in 2023 is that state natural resource agencies need to collaborate with their DOTs to consider BATS on transportation projects. That's pretty basic. And then use national survey protocols and make sure that trained staff are doing those surveys. And that doesn't mean you have to have a really formal training in your state. There's training materials that are provided. There's a free training video available online. It's linked all over the place, but you can just go to YouTube and put BATS in transportation structures and find it. And then also, really importantly, submitting that data to NA-BAT, which is why Andrea is here, so that we can get information about how BATS are using transportation structures across North America. And that will allow us to effectively manage and conserve those populations that are using transportation structures without having these project delays that would be a problem if you waited until the last minute and found this huge colony on your bridge that you were about to demolish. So we have a lot of supporting materials for this. NA-BAT worked on an SOP for what to look for when you're assessing structures. There's also information in the range-wide guidance that was just revised. I mentioned that we had the training video, and there are multiple states that have started their own trainings. We have a training that we do every year in Georgia. It's generally 3 or 4 sessions, and we invite anyone to come. It's free if you're not a consultant working for DOT in Georgia, and then it's $100, which, like, really, that's pretty much free. But we invite everybody to come, and we've trained a lot of other state agency people and DOT people so that they can take those trainings to their states. It's really important to understand what you're doing before you're surveying structures for BATS, because it may not be something you've ever done before, and there's a lot of things that you need to know to look for. It's not difficult, but it's really important to do some training before you start. And then submitting the data to NA-BAT. Likely your state resource agency is already using NA-BAT. Most of us are. And these surveys are considered internal colony counts. So it's basically because this is a colony, you can count it that way and use that data sheet. We can also use this to enter emergence count data. We do emergence counts on structures sometimes when we can't physically see the BATS or get a good count. And then there's a survey 1, 2, 3 form that has the required fields for NA-BAT that I'll talk about a little bit more. And you can follow that SOP guidance to do those surveys. So it's really kind of laid out how to get the data collected correctly. And there's a lot of information on that, the BATS and transportation structures drive that you can look at from other states. People have different things that they want to collect, and we encourage states to collect things in whatever way they need to while they're out there. We have a survey 1, 2, 3 form template that is from the one that we developed in Georgia, so we can collect data in the field that can be modified. So that's available on our drive. We also have paper data sheets and other forms that are used to assess those structures. So there's a lot of templates and examples available if you haven't set up anything for your own state yet. And then, as I mentioned, one of the things we'd really like to do is have the survey 1, 2, 3 data form collect data in a way that can be put directly into NA-BAT. So we don't have to enter data multiple times, which is what we're always trying to avoid. So currently Ben Neese with the Southeastern BAT Hub is working on getting a modified survey 1, 2, 3 form that will do this, and we'll roll that out when it's ready to go so that states can use it. And you can also modify that template for your own use. So if there are things in there you want to collect that aren't in there, you can do that. So the next steps for this resolution is to increase awareness, which is why I'm here. I'm talking to you about the resolution and the training materials available. Talk about coordinating this before this upcoming survey season, especially for those states that are a little colder, that have a lot more activity in the summertime, and increase generally the cooperation between DOTs and state resource agencies. That's why DNR is here at the conference, because we want to make sure that we can better understand things we can do to cooperate with our DOTs. And that's all that I have. These are just some things to prompt questions that you might be thinking about, things we're trying to figure out. What else can we do as the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies BAT Working Group to help get more resources to people that want to do these surveys? And what kinds of questions do you have? How would you better tempt your DOT to do this? Like, what kinds of things would make it more likely that they would accept these kinds of things? So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thanks a lot for listening.
Great. Thank you, Trina. So are there any questions from folks either online? And Deb, are you able to see those? Okay. Or anyone from the audience? Go ahead, Deb.
There is one that just asked me to mention some.
Of course.
Okay. Okay. Do you recommend that DOTs conduct research to possibly narrow down lists of culverts needing surveys?
That's a good question. So I think that, it's really going to depend on your structures and what DOT is trying to accomplish. But there's been a lot of work done already in a lot of areas. So I think you may have a good idea of what sites really need to be surveyed. In Georgia, for example, after all the surveys that we did and really targeting culverts to see what was appropriate, we only require surveys in concrete structures that are 3 feet and above. Now, that's partly for safety reasons. I've been in culverts less than 3 feet. It's not the greatest situation, and it's not always the safest. And it doesn't mean bats won't be in there, but we think the likelihood is a lot lower, and we're probably not going to be able to require people to look at those. But we still ask that if you see signs, even if you don't feel comfortable going in, that you let us know. And then culverts that are metal just don't tend to have as much of the appropriate areas for bats to be in our state, especially. So that, again, that doesn't mean bats won't use metal culverts, but we decided because of all the surveys to structure that, or the structures to survey, that we don't require it. So I think you can look at information from other states, but if there's specific questions you have, research could be, helpful. It's always helpful to learn more, but I think there's already a lot of information.
Great.
Thank you for your presentation. I know you said that the state DOTs and then CDFW are all together with this, but sometimes some projects it's not on state right away. So are you guys going to expand it to counties, cities, unincorporated and non-incorporated cities, all those people? Because if you count them bats, they all help them. They do a lot of things positive for us. And if we leave them out, then the numbers, we cannot get correct numbers. So
yeah, that's a great question. It's something I did not address. That's definitely something that's on our list to do, to try to get more local municipalities and local, agencies that manage roads. We've certainly involved federal agencies like the Forest Service. They have a lot of roads that they manage, and they survey their structures on their property before work is done. But we would love to know the best way to reach those groups of, smaller municipalities that manage these systems. There's also things where bats use interesting structures like sand traps and weird things on the coast that I've never even seen, and sewer systems. Like, there's all kinds of places where bats could be. So getting more information to all the groups that manage these utilities that could house bats is important. So yes, that is something that we want to do. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And if I can add, that is also the benefit of having a central repository like in a BAT for those data, so that multiple agencies and organizations are able to potentially view and access that information.
Do they prefer cross trains, or do they also go like those longitudinal systems?
You're using a lot of engineering speak, but they.
Okay, the translation. Yeah.
Do they go in super long pipes as well?
There you go. That's what I like. Yes, they love super long pipes that are very cave-like, and they can really be anywhere. So there may be a spot where there's a drop inlet where they can't get out the top, but that's perfect because it's kind of like a hollow tree cavity. So they'll be up there. We have We have southeastern myotis that have maternity colonies in those sites. So if it's big enough for a bat to fly in and there's airflow and the temperature is pretty, like it's kind of a place where they can have a thermally stable environment, then they often are going to be looking to use it if they can get there. And if they're not disturbed, which a lot of these places almost never people are in. So, and if it doesn't flood all the time.
Thank you for that presentation. I was just wondering also, when you're tracking this data, does any of this correlate with white nose syndrome? Or is that a fully separate database?
Well, Andrea will probably talk about this more later, but yeah, NAVAT includes all kinds of survey data, and that is, it really came about because of the declines from white nose syndrome, and so that's why we started collecting data centrally. It took a disease, but at least we're doing it now. So yeah, it's all related. And we definitely track anytime we have white nose syndrome that's detected in culverts or other structures.
And I think Jason, here in a little bit, will touch on some of the information they've been able to collect about bats using structures in Colorado, but also how white nose is being, or TB leading to white nose is being tracked as well.
At what point in the process are you recommending that these surveys be conducted? Like in the planning, we always say as early as possible.
Yeah.
But, at what point are a lot of these happening?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely when we would recommend it as early as possible. And we definitely work closely with our DOT to determine if there's going to be a big project that they know is going to take a long time, have a lot of coordination. They may say, hey, we did that in the beginning when we were kind of playing catch up and hadn't done the surveys. We need to have this stretch of roadway surveyed really well because we're going to replace all these structures, or we're going to do this work on all these structures. So it definitely is good early in the process. And then having a good procedure for what to do when you find bats is really important. So you just need to have that communication between your resource agency and your DOT.
Okay, so we have our last question for Trina, and then we'll have time.
We'll have lots of other bat people up here.
This is more of a follow-up to the earlier question. But one thing that might be helpful, since that Appendix K and doing those structure assessments is good for 2 years with federal highways, is taking a look at the list, in your STIP or, whatever planning document you have, and getting with your bridge folks and figuring out, okay, which are the ones, like Trina was saying, that are going to be coming up in the next 2 to 3 years that are going to have some sort of significant below deck bridge work, and then you can prioritize accordingly with the ones that are more likely to have that work come up soon.
Great, thanks, Kristen.